In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did that produce? The cuckoo clock.
Welcome, everyone, back to another edition of Let's Take Five, the podcast where we look at one of the greats of cinema and discuss their excellence and range. My name is Eric Martindale.
My name is Austin Luger.
And today we are beginning the journey on our Orson Welles Five. The films we are going to cover are Citizen Kane, The Third Man, Othello, The Touch of Evil, and Chimes of Midnight. Sorry, going off my bad memory. And today we are going to start with none other than Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane was a film that came out a while ago that you might have seen on the AFI's top 100. You might have seen it somewhere around first. First, which it's been there for quite a bit.
When they did the whole 10 years later,
yeah,
they got first again, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it didn't move.
Vertigo snuck up there.
Citizen Kane Singing in the Rain snuck up there. Casablanca lost a spot, I think, to Godfather, which I think is number 2 now. But anyway, so it's the film about Charles Foster Kane, who sort of from rags to riches, and then from riches to owning a newspaper, an entrepreneur, from the entrepreneur to the politician, from the politician to the, what would you call him after that? Almost socialite, famous person that people are looking for quotes in their newspaper and stuff like that. And it's basically the story about Charles Foster Kane and the word rosebud that he uttered right before he died. You follow the reporter who's supposed to figure out what rosebud means, and we follow the reporter as he talks to several important figures in Charles Foster Kane's life. And from there, we are taking the movie told non-linearly back to various flashbacks through Charles Foster Kane's life, so we start to see sort of a story about how this man lost his soul. This movie is an absolute powerhouse of directing. It is a powerhouse of writing. It's a powerhouse of acting. It's a powerhouse of cinematography. It's a powerhouse of makeup. There is nary a wrinkle in the final product of this film. It is, if not the best film ever made, it's certainly it's certainly the most well-made film. I think I can say that I know I can say that without any hesitation because everyone else agrees.
Right.
So, it is, as I said to Austin, having rewatched it now, this is probably the 5th time I've seen it. I said, is it the greatest film ever? I don't know. But I know one thing. It's not overrated. So what do you think, Austin?
I've seen this film so many times now, and what is shocking about it, because everything you just said is intimidating.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, those words can be described for lots of other kind of great films or epic films of cinema. The Gone with the Winds, the Lawrence of Arabia. Is like, this is everything that cinema can be in its grand scope. And yet, unlike those films, which I do like quite a bit, I can watch Citizen Kane like all the time. Mm-hmm. Because there's also something just fundamentally entertaining about it that people like don't know going in. Like, I think the prestige that is affected around this and Casablanca, when people watch it for the first time, are surprised how much they'll laugh, how much they'll just enjoy watching it, which means you're more able to get swept up in the fate of the characters. And this is a story that says, point blank, not only did Charles Foster Kane die, here's exactly how he died, in a really entertaining news piece. It's an info dump because it's literally, that's what the news is. It gives you information, typically in a dumping-like fashion.
Yeah, but it runs this news right at the beginning.
And it's still, that is so well made. And what's great about that opening of saying birth to death of Kane, most people watching the news will then say, okay, I got it. Because it doesn't feel like it's hinting at like the mysterious thing. It's like, whoa, what happened in the 40s for him? It is the illusion of a full life. And the more you uncover this, it's just really sad because since you don't have Kane to defend himself. And the more you get to know the world of Charles Foster Kane, the more you realize if he was here, you wouldn't believe him anyway.
Yeah.
You just get... I mean, the reporter interviews 4 people, right? His 2 friends and his 2 wives?
Yes.
Is that how that worked? Yeah.
Yeah.
These are people who definitely knew him the most. And none of them could definitively say everything about him. Mm-hmm. It's nice that, like, you know, every man in life has these stages. No, it's like they all got close in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. There's a reason why Charles Foster Kane and an extension Orson Welles was so popular, because the guy knows how to fill a room, right? I mean, when he buys that the paper and he has like the most ridiculous party and he comes back married and here's all the crap he bought, mm-hmm. you would hate most people who do that. Like, oh my, you would, like, in real life, I would hate those guys, and yet I'm singing along with this. Even
yes, when he buys all the guys from the rival newspaper, he recruits them to the new newspaper that he just acquired. He has a charming arrogance and presence to him that you kind of like looking at him through a microscope rather than being in the same room with him in some ways, because he is so entertaining. Like, but what I mean is, like, he's the type of guy that I think could convince you to sell your soul, which is like some people kind of do that get around him. But yeah, he purchases this newspaper and these lofty ideals of telling, like, you know, the actual truth and the true story. But in reality, he's just purchasing the best news writers around, and he's having them write the news and in many ways fabricate it, or at least bend it to, you know, what he wants the media's perception of an event to be. As they say, the people will think, Charles, whatever I tell them to think, you know. And, you know, it really is very much, and I hate using this term almost because it's so popular right now for, I was going to say different reasons, but actually kind of similar reasons. Fake news. That's essentially kind of how it works.
Well, it's not always...
It's about the spin.
It's not
how to spin it.
It's not fake news. It's more towards... There's also a problem now of the misrepresentation of importance.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So, like, I mean, Charles Foster Kane is openly based off William Randolph Hearst. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a fan of that. Well, that mogul. But, like, so you would have Kane focus on his political enemies more. That even if his enemies are doing something bad, it's like the 7th bad thing of the day. Well, and now we need to do a whole thing on that.
There is a time where it does seem to literally be publishing fake news, and it's a part where, and I don't know this, I mean, maybe there was some event of this happening, but when Charles Foster Kane runs for governor, he's expected to win, but the scandal breaks out that he's having an affair on his wife. He then is going to lose now. There's 2 versions of the paper that are ready to print at the news that he's taken over. One of them says Kane wins. One of them says fraud at the polls.
Yeah, it's true.
So
and I make too many Trump parallels in all my podcasts.
No. I mean, it is. I mean, I think like.
But he was saying that a few days before the election that if he didn't win, we're going to recount this stuff.
Well, I mean, listen, yeah, I mean, wherever you fall on the spectrum of that, there, in the way our times are right now, I think it's almost impossible to not see the parallels between Charles Foster Kane and Donald Trump.
You know, this is his favorite film.
Is it?
Ken Burns did like a series like for the Oscars, so, like they would ask like celebrities like their favorite film for a white screen, and he did like a 2-minute spiel on why it's Kane's favorite film, and it's amazing. It's on YouTube because I don't think Trump knows what this movie's about. And you can tell because Trump ran for president. Well, and unlike Kane, he won.
Well, also, too, you know, there's a scandal that breaks out right before the election in this case. Yeah. The difference is that Charles Foster Kane didn't get elected. And
if Trump had the awareness, do you think he went like, guys, is this Kane?
I'm Kane.
Is this... Oh, shit, guys.
Okay. Well, but throughout, so, like, let's talk a little bit about the characters here in the film and sort of how this is directed. First of all, the actual cinematography in this is incredible, and it's hard to, like, talk about that and without it seeming like... It's really hard to describe what you... Like, you're just seeing, like, great camera shots, but I think one instance that sort of merges them together here is 2 different characters. You have Charles Foster Kane, and you have his first wife, and they're in the room together, and they're in love at first. So you're always shooting from the middle of the table. The camera's either looking to the left, and it's looking at Kane, or it's looking to the right, and it's looking at his wife. It's the other end of the table. So you have several things happening in this sequence that are very, very new to... This is 41, I think? Mm-hmm. So very, very new to 41. You have... This in general, this shot, this passage of time, the way it jump cuts, the camera keeps going back and forth to these two characters through the eras. So each time we see them, they're less in love, and they're also growing older, which is done through makeup. They're also growing fatter. So you have the makeup mixed with the camera shot, mixed with the way of telling a story. This is not a shot. This idea of a passage of time like this is not... This is new. This is a new idea here.
And also, it always feels like the table's getting longer.
Yeah,
is it actually?
Well, they're getting further apart. It probably is.
Yeah,
it probably is, because they would think about that. And then you're seeing the changes in the characters, not just in the way they feel about each other, but in what they say and what they don't say, but also how their demeanor, the way they speak to each other. And I love the end of it. The very end of it, they're older, and they don't even say a word to each other this time, him and his wife, and she's reading a different newspaper.
Yeah,
and
that's not his.
It's not his.
Yeah.
And it's just quiet, and she's just reading the newspaper, and it's very, very quick, and it's almost like an Easter egg, and I think it's amazing.
It's funny because like there's so many like trivia aspects to the way Orson Welles like reinvented cinema with this movie. Someone did ask him at one point, what did you like study to like go towards your first movie? And he said, I just watched Stagecoach by John Ford 100 times. I mean, John Ford, that's a guy who went out to Monument Valley. Mm-hmm. Still in a time when people are making the lamest sound stages for a quick Hollywood buck. You get the stories that everyone knows of that Orson Welles pulled up plywood from the ground so he can get the camera even lower to kind of get that. It's those things that are camera tricks, but it's always great when it always works for an audience. Like, you know what it means, even if you don't know it with your articulation, of when you see a camera that low, basically at the character's feet, and you see like their head almost like hitting the ceiling. That is a sense of power. That is a sense of dominance. You are a giant in the room.
Well, the news guy who's tasked with going to get all the information about Charles Foster Kane and what Rosebud actually means, you never see his face the entire film. He's always in shadow. Huh. He's literally always in shadow. It's not that his face is turned away from you.
Well, you see parts of his face, but never like perfectly clean. Like
it's always obscured. You cannot. You could watch that movie 1,000 times and have no idea what that guy looks like.
That's true. But you see his eyes, like small parts, right? Like when he turns into the room,
you can't really see his face. Yeah, there's a shadow on his face. Yeah, you never will see his full face in a shot, and obviously the reason is because in all the questions, every time he's interviewing one of Charles Foster Kane's previous relationships or friends or whatever, the camera is always shot with him. We're seeing his back looking at the person he's interviewing. The reason for that is because is obvious.
He's not the story. He's the journalist.
He's not the story. He's the journalist. He's getting the story. It kind of in a weird way puts us into that position, because as we get more nuggets and more tidbits, we lean forward too, and we're asking the question, so what does Rosebud actually mean? And what about Charles Foster Kane? Tell me more. And it almost puts us in the shoes of the journalist himself. And speaking of those scenes, another thing which is, relatively unknown at the time, I'm sure, and I've heard this argument before. This did not invent nonlinear storytelling in film, but it's still to popularize it and use it so well.
It is so seamless because like. So earlier in cinema, you got someone like Sergei Eisenstein, the Russian silent filmmaker, who used jump cuts and like extreme close-ups in a way that was intentionally supposed to be jarring. It was editing to show you editing, to really kind of put it in your face and make you as unnerved as these unioners who are rioting and whatnot. This is just a perfectly orchestrated three-ring circus in a way of like, I'm going to keep moving you in a direction. You're never going to sit still long enough. and this is kind of the world of Kane in a way.
We're continually going back and forth between present day to when he first got there, to when to when he first got there, when he first arrived at the newspaper place, to when to the middle sections to his life, to his later life. We get different pieces here and there.
It's insane. It's never confusing.
It's never confusing, and you know what? A large part of that, which brings me to my other article that I mentioned earlier, because I mentioned cinematography, acting, directing, the makeup. The makeup is unbelievably good because all the actors, all these actors are in their 20s, and they're playing people up to very old age, and we always know where they are in their lives based on how they look physically. And in Kane's case, not just his face looking older, but he gets a lot fatter. He gets a big, which obviously art imitates life here, but with Orson Welles, but he gets a double chin. Even
he didn't guess how fat he's going to be.
Yeah, well, exactly. He gets the double chin, the mustache, like all this other stuff, and it really is effective because the makeup really is. It's amazing from an acting perspective and a makeup perspective because all the characters, the characterizations, the things that they actually present, age with the makeup. Charles Foster Kane sounds a little older. He moves a little older. He talks a little, he speaks a little older, just like Jedediah does. Same
Joseph
thing.
Cotton as Jedediah.
Joseph Cotton is incredible.
He's so good at all ages of that character, but I love when you first see him, it's almost like a trick. At that point, no one knows Joseph Cotton is. He's just he's part of the Mercury Theater company that Orson Welles is part of, who did the famous Julius Caesar show, but, that old show. But you meet him, he's just an old, dirty old man in a nursing home, right? He wants his cigars.
Yes.
Sting with cigars.
He wants the cigars.
And then you cut to, when he first meets Kane, and he's 60 years younger. Mm-hmm. But, it's just crazy to see. And Joseph Cotton is always my, underdog in this movie, because I think he's always such a great actor. And in this, the way that he... Because you got the two friends, right? Mm-hmm. You have the one guy who is a lot giddier about the idea of Kane. Like, I am all in. I'm excited to be part of this. We're gonna make a ton of money. You have the vision. This will never go wrong. And Jedediah is always like, can you kind of keep that piece of paper of you making your promises at this age? This can mean a lot. And so when you see the compassion he does have for Kane, because it's not like he's just being the asshole in the room.
Well, no, that's what makes it so heartbreaking.
He's always worried that Kane
they both care about each other,
and that's why their great finale when Jedediah is the art critic when he has to review Kane's second wife's opera piece, which is, that alone we could talk about for a while because it's just so beautifully sad, but he knows it's terrible. He's making paper dolls during the playbill and such, and
he's writing this scathing review. They haven't talked with each other in years, which we didn't know that until that scene. And again, it's never confusing. We understood it because we saw the tension building between the two. And he goes in there and he sees Jedediah drunk and passed out because I presume he's drinking because it's like he knows what this means. Because that's Jedediah's fork in the road, right? You have Charles Foster Kane, who's decided long ago to sell a soul. He doesn't care about the Constitution piece of paper that they wrote. He's about making money and about selling Charles Foster Kane. Jedediah wants to be the art critic. His first step in order to continually to report journalism is to get away from Kane, move from New York and move to Chicago, because if he doesn't have Kane over him, he can feel free to actually be a journalist. But then he has to review Charles Foster Kane's second wife. So it comes to the fork in the road where he's finally at a point where to keep his job, he has to lie. He has to write a fake review. He's getting drunk. He passes out at the typewriter.
And this is what I always thought was interesting about Jedediah, because he passed the typewriter after he's made a bad review, or almost made.
Almost. He just wrote the first paragraph.
Yeah. But in my mind, Jedediah decided he's going to turn that in, he's going to be fired, it's not going to print.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why
No, and that's true. That was a decision that he made.
Kane was furious, but then Kane finishes the review.
It's incredible, and the way the camera's set up, you see Kane writing the review furiously, writing how terrible his wife is, finishing the review for Jedediah. Jedediah even says right before he walks out there, he says, "I knew you would never print that." He walks out there, and he says, "Hello, Jedediah. You're fired."
Yeah.
And then he prints it. It's really sad.
Well, and I think it's sad because something I always like the more I rewatch this film is about the way he approaches his second wife. The first one really kind of did feel like a marriage of, well, this makes sense.
Yes.
Right? We are similar families. This is what we do. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that passionate. The second one, and it ties into the idea or the main theory of Rosebud, she made him happy.
Yeah.
Like, she really did. And, like, she's this mess of a woman, annoying voice, does not have her life together, but she's kind, brings men from the cold. And when she plays music, it means something to him in a way that's not, like, competitive.
Well, that's the thing, is he waded into an area he knew absolutely nothing about. He actually enjoys her voice. I firmly believe that he thinks she's a good singer.
Which is why the applause he does, which is now a very popular GIF of him just accompanying. But I think the only way that he knows how to convey any sort of pride is to do it in the most capitalistic way possible. Mm-hmm. I had the resources to make you your own opera house. This is weirdly how I'm showing love, even though you are not in any way prepared to run an opera house.
Yeah, and to be honest, to a layman, she sounds fine to me, which is actually something that... Is she the best singer in the world? No. You know what she's great at singing for? In the parlor with Charles Foster Kane, not in an opera. And
but also, she can go to classes. I mean, she's going through the rush of it all because in his mind, much like how Charles Foster Kane did not start on a small level of being a public servant, right? I need to be governor.
Yeah.
Like, I've never done this for my life. Never been a newsman. I'm just going to do this. And because since he has no one to tell him no, and he's not listening to her, and because like she clearly doesn't want to do this. Well, all of her scenes are so... It's edited in a whirl, right? She has the teacher, the costumes, the grandeur of it all. And
you could write a whole paper on the first opening shot of that opera house when he's trying to teach her. He's like trying to coach her. The coach is right before the curtain goes up, and then all the scenes being moved in the background, then the curtain raising up. It's the saturation and composition of that shot alone is beyond anything you really expect to see in this era, and quite frankly. In this era now, currently, as well.
Sure.
I mean, people just aren't as concerned with that type of stuff.
And then, I mean, ultimately, the tragedy is since there's no way for Kane to really, in his mind, he can't be with someone who isn't the best, it kind of falls apart because he can't do something that he likes. It has to be something more important and more grander. Essentially, we don't get all of her parts of the story, but she snaps, and we see her. She is in
Xanadu.
She's in Xanadu, and unlike those shots of her on the stage, which was also chaotic, it's so wide and empty. Mm-hmm. The thing is bigger than most buildings, the room she's in, and she's doing a small puzzle on a table.
Yeah, in front of a fireplace that's as big as a football field.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my god, those sets, by the way. Xanadu.
Xanadu's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, not even that. Also, too, the paintings of Xanadu that they have as the facades looks amazing. So he spends all his time there. He buys all this European statuary that's everywhere. He's got, like, people living in the place with him just to, like, give an illusion of friends or something like that. People he's paying and buying off. And he's got her there, and he's completely unhappy. I mean, the movie alludes to the fact that, and I think it's true, I mean, I have no reason to doubt this, is that, he moved there to get away from everybody once he failed.
Yeah.
Once he failed, it wasn't... and everyone exposed him as a failure, that's not something he was able to take. He can't buy his way out of that. So he builds himself a fortress and sort of caves himself in with a few other people and his current wife. And, she's miserable. But there's no way he isn't either.
Oh, he's so miserable. I mean, like,
he won't leave because he's too stubborn.
The way he destroys that room.
Oh my god!
I mean, really, I think of the 2 points I think of Orson Welles as Kane in the movie is him leading like the chorus line of people at that silly party, and him just drunkenly stumbling and very clearly, like in a method acted way, just destroying the room. Like he definitely did not think that plate then that plate kind of thing.
No,
it is just a gross mess, and he looks so old doing it too, which is so.
Well,
good.
It's like all stiff and everything.
Yeah,
too, which brings me to that sort of point I was alluding to in our wrap up of Gene Kelly 5 is that Orson Welles is an underrated actor, surprisingly, because, and I could go into this for a variety of reasons, but the biggest one being that he predates the early method actors. So we have this whole area where everyone's stage acting in Hollywood. You know, you think of Vivien Leigh, you know, how much she postures when she acts, because it's as if she's playing to a proscenium that doesn't exist. You know, until, you know, you get Lee Strasberg saying, you know, getting his crew together and basically saying, no, you're playing literally to the camera, not to the room. You're playing to the camera. You really, when you know actors and you live in an actor's post that sort of society, you look back and you think, wow, some of these performances everyone thought were great. They're kind of goofy. Like, you look at Streetcar Named Desire, which people think is one of the best acted films ever. Carl Malden was nominated. Carl Malden was, I think Carl Malden won. Estella won, and Vivien Leigh won. Marlon Brando didn't. It's because he was doing something completely different.
Right.
So you look at Orson Welles in this film, and this is predating that by a decade, and it's incredible.
Yeah,
he's and Joseph Cotton too.
Joseph Cotton.
But he's so good. Actually, all of them. All the actors are so good.
His little friend is a little hammy, but I think it's a good hammy.
But the character's kind of hammy too, right?
I think it fits, but he can fall on some older methods in a way that does fit very well for the character.
Yeah. All those Mercury Theater actors, like both the wives, everyone is like really, really good. I think it's interesting, by the way, and I feel like you're on a point. I just want to say this: that the 2 scenes you remember him from aren't the most famous. Neither are the most famous scene in the movie, because I think of him in front of the campaign rally. Right?
Sure.
So.
Yeah, it's these kind of small things, and just also that line of when his adopted father is saying like, it's sorry, I just want to small tangent, but like since he interviews all those people, right, he can just read that guy's book, which perfectly matches how cold of a man this guy was. They don't want to get a face to face with him. It is just you're allowed to read this section of the biography. Yeah, like that is such a.
And you can only stick to this section.
Yeah. And it's just so, like, we now know more about what he was like as a parent as well, by the way he is treating his afterlife.
Yeah.
But that great thing when it's either him or someone he's working with says, like, you know, you're losing, like, $1 million a year in this paper. Yeah. And Charles goes like, oh, man, probably lost $1 million last year. I'm going to lose $1 million next year. And if I go this way, I guess I'm going to have to close the paper in, like, 30, 60 years.
It may have said 30 years.
Yeah, but it's just it's reminiscent of like the way that like when Robert Downey Jr. is most snarkiest as Iron Man, when he knows that the line works so well, he can just be so still. I mean, he wears sunglasses during that scene, but like Orson Welles just very happily like looks right at him and smirks, going, "I won." Next argument you have, because you. I'm going to keep doing this because since you plucked me out of my home, I will always win from now on.
Yeah,
I'm of your creation.
And do you just because it's Citizen Kane and Citizen Kane is Citizen Kane? What do you think of when people say Citizen Kane's the best movie ever?
Sure.
Is that you go sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where. There's no objective best.
Yeah.
It's something that someone's citing it's the best film. I have no reason to argue because holy shit, it's that good.
Yeah, I used to get down with that debate because they were the same year, or they were right next to each other, Casablanca and Citizen Kane. So they're fun to
similar
compare.
years, yeah.
Yeah, like 2 years, 1 year apart. So it's always fun to compare. And Wizard of Oz ran that era too, but like it's kind of fun to kind of compare and talk about those films, right? And everyone always puts them always like high on list of top 50, top 10, whatever. So you always have Casablanca and Citizen Kane right there. And it's always Citizen Kane like ahead of Casablanca. Well, I feel like more people have seen Casablanca. I may be completely wrong about that. But whenever there's like a conversation, those debates, I always used to say, well, I think Citizen Kane's the better movie. I think Casablanca is the one I'd rather watch right now. And now I actually think that Citizen Kane, and maybe it's my tastes have evolved, or, not evolved, but changed,
Sure.
Because Casablanca is a fucking masterpiece. I think Citizen Kane is better, and I think it's more watchable. I think it's both. I think it's really that good of a movie that... because I feel like there's a lot of snark that thrown at it for being number one, and to those people I say, have you seen it? It's
really fun. Like, and it's weird how fun it is. And I mean, Casablanca, I also think is incredibly fun and incredibly brilliant and incredibly understated about how the way it tells its story. Just if we're going to weirdly compare these two films that really have nothing to do with each other,
but they're always compared. Yeah, they're always right there.
The only thing I don't love about Casablanca, a film that I adore, is I don't love the newsreel at the very beginning. Yeah. But I'm okay with the newsreel at the beginning of Citizen Kane. Yeah. So if we're going to go on newsreel scenes alone to begin the film, Citizen Kane got that one.
Yeah, it's like those, you get those, and then maybe like The Godfather. Those are usually the ones you'll see up there battle. And now all of a sudden Vertigo.
Well, we have to wrap up with this topic because it is mandatory for the nature of the discussion. Roger Ebert called this the greatest plot hole in cinema history because Charles Foster Kane has to die alone for every thematic reason.
I know.
And yet, who heard him say Rosebud? But you haven't heard him say Rosebud. What is Rosebud to you? What is the answer to this unsolvable mystery?
So that plot hole, I'm proud to say, as a huge Roger Ebert reader, I didn't know that. So, I didn't know that Roger Ebert had said that. I recognized this plot hole on my own.
Yeah.
If no one's in the room to hear him say Rosebud, then how do we know he said Rosebud?
But he has to be alone.
Thematically, he has to be alone. But he literally does kind of die alone in the movie.
Yes.
Like, he dies, and then someone enters right afterwards. Yeah, no one's in the room when he says Rosebud, so how did they know he said Rosebud?
Right. But I don't care.
Okay, so what is Rosebud?
I mean, that's if we have a whole movie about a man searching for Rosebud, and we're going to discuss a movie for a half hour. I think
so Rosebud is the biggest spoiler in film history. Rosebud's his sled he sled on whenever he was a kid. Now,
spoiler, it's in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it is, but you don't know it's called Rosebud until the end of the movie.
Oh, really? Yeah. I come over the shot there.
No, you see it in the fire burning, and it says Rosebud. I think it's a longing to start over.
Oh, okay.
That's the way I think. I think most people say, innocence of youth, I want to go back to before I was a shit, or, a million different things that all are kind of like very, like Ebenezer Scrooge to me. The way I look at it is, I wish I could start over. I wish I could do things differently. I wish I could go back to the beginning.
See, that's even sadder for me because, whereas I don't necessarily attribute it to a moment of youth. It's just moments where he actually did feel happy. That is the last thing you see before, like, he's taken away from his mother kind of thing. I think he probably just enjoyed playing on that sled. The idea of even playing. And I think that's reinvigorated with his second wife, and then he ruins that. I believe if Charles Foster Kane had the opportunity to start over, he would fail again.
Yeah. Well, but would Charles Foster Kane think that?
No, which I'm thinking the tragedy because
it's definitely a tragedy. No matter how it ends with a guy dead talking about something that seemed rather mundane,
right,
to everyone else, and that's the big mystery. But I
love that it does burn at the end because you have this giant.
No one's ever going to know what it was. That's the thing too.
That means like he cared about this thing. He had an emotional connection to this thing. And it's surrounded by thousands of pieces of things that he probably didn't have an emotional connection to at all. But those are worth more in the eyes of everyone else, and this was a piece of wood.
Well, and that's the kind of gets into the complexities of Kane too. Is it's almost as if he wanted those things to be important. He tried to will them to be important.
Oh, just like his paper, right?
Yeah, just like his paper. He just wanted. If he owned them and he surrounded himself by him, it's a status thing, and also, like, that makes them important just because they're in my room. But that doesn't really pierce
and same with him as a candidate. He didn't have actual positions he was going on. He just wanted to say that Getty was a crook kind of thing. And it's really... If he truly had things that he cared about, he would then go do those things in later life, right? Like he would, build schools, whatever his campaign thing would be. Like, but he didn't because he wanted to put himself up to. I need to be more. I need to have my picture be 2 stories high. I need to have my wife be the greatest opera singer of all time.
And you're longing to find something about Charles Foster Kane that you can hang your hat on and say, I think in the darkest, deepest of his own heart, he was a good person. Because I honestly, genuinely feel that way.
I do.
Yeah. I do feel like somewhere in there, he was a good person. It was clouded by money and greed and a million other things. And sadness, right. But the sadness part really didn't get sold to us until the final moments. And then you're like, oh, I mean, it does kind of all make sense.
It all tracks, yeah.
Like, right. Because as far as we know, he never reconnected with his mother. So... his mother basically just gives him away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost kind of confusing how cold she is. I don't...
Right.
It kind of adds to the mystery, I guess.
It does. From all I can tell, it's just like this rich guy wanting a kid. This woman's poor. So I'll buy your kid. That's what I took it as.
Yeah, it was almost kind of...
And she chose to be, I think, colder in those final moments with them just to make it easier for herself. I like to hope.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
So if you haven't seen Citizen Kane and you're really into this film podcast, check it out.
Great.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on Citizen Kane, about any of these characters and these the bold filmmaking of the film. We'd love to hear your thoughts over at theartofmore.com. You can leave a comment there. While you're there, check out their podcast. The Immortals is on a 1-month hiatus as I rest, basically, and then we're going to come back in December with episode 101. Episode 100 is out now, so I've mentioned before. It's very fun, and we can now publicly say that it was Adam Lord's last show. But he's still around.
Pretend I'm standing up like Charles Foster Kane right now.
I think he has a really great farewell in that, but he's still around because he just did this cool intro for this episode. So thank you, Adam, for that.
Courtesy of the third man.
Yes, which we're going to be discussing next week on this very show. Also, we're at the website. Check out Ad Absurdum. Really cool episode about Inception and about really interesting ways of insider trading and what happens to copyright ownership when dreamscapes exist. Because used to be you just have to mail it to yourself. What if you just dream about the idea now?
What about Adam Lord's thing? Did we finish out how to get music by Adam Lord? Did we say that?
Oh, songs by alord.com.
And I'm at Constant Diversion. I cut you off on that. That's why I was like, wait a minute, I think you were going that way, and I said, let me, steal a show. Like
non-linear.
It's non-linear. Constant Diversion's my YouTube channel. You can check me out on there. And that about wraps it up for me.
So yeah, next time we'll be back with The Third Man, a film that was not written and directed by Orson Welles, and yet people are surprised that he's not in every single scene and didn't direct this, because this movie is synonymous.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that, it's something special. Check that out. So we're back next week. Till then, I'm Austin Ligger.
I'm Eric Martindale.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Is that really your idea of how to run a newspaper?
I don't know how to run a newspaper, Mr. Thatcher. I just try everything I can think of.
Charles, you know perfectly well there's not the slightest proof that this armada's off the Jersey
Hello,
coast.
Mr. Bernstein.
Excuse me, Mr.
Can you
Kane.
prove it isn't?
This just
Mr.
came
Bernstein,
in.
I'd like you to meet Mr. Thatcher.
How do you do, Mr. Thatcher?
Leland,
Hello.
Mr. Thatcher, my ex-guardian.
From Cuba.
We have no secrets from our readers, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Thatcher is one of our most devoted readers. He knows what's wrong with every copy of the Enquirer since I took over. Read the cable.
Girls delightful in Cuba, stop.
Could send you prose poems about scenery, but don't feel right spending your money. Stop. There is no war in Cuba. Signed, Wheeler. Any answer?
Yes, dear Wheeler, you provide the prose poems. I'll provide the war.
That's fine, Mr. Kane.
Yes, I rather liked myself.
Charles,
Send it right away.
I came to see you about this campaign of
Thatcher.
yours. This Enquirer campaign against the Public Transit Company.
Mr. Thatcher, do you know anything we could use against them?
Still the college boy, aren't you?
Oh, no, Mr. Thatcher. I was expelled from college. A lot of colleges, you remember. I remember.
Charles, I think I should remind you of a fact that you seem to have forgotten.
Yes,
That you are
Mr. Thatcher.
yourself one of the largest individual
Mr. Thatcher.
stockholders in the Public Transit Company.
The trouble is you don't realize you're talking to two people. As Charles Foster Kane, who owns 82,364 shares of public transit preferred, you see, I do have a general idea of my holdings. I sympathize with you. Charles Foster Kane is a scoundrel. His paper should be run out of town. A committee should be formed to boycott him. You may, if you can form such a committee, put me down for a contribution of $1,000.
My time's
On the other hand, I am the publisher of the Inquirer. As such, it's my duty, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's also my pleasure to see to it that decent, hard-working people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates just because they haven't anybody to look after their interests. I'll let you in on another little secret, Mr. Thatcher. I think I'm the man to do it, you see. I have money and property. If I don't look after the interests of the underprivileged, maybe somebody else will. Maybe somebody without any money or property.
Yes.
And that would
money
be too
and property.
bad.
Well, I happened to see your financial statement today, Charles.
Oh, did you?
Now, tell me honestly, my boy, don't you think it's rather unwise to continue this philanthropic enterprise? This Inquirer that's costing you $1 million a year?
You're right, Mr. Thatcher. I did lose $1 million last year. I expect to lose $1 million this year. I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place in 60 years.